My name is Brian Spencer. This is my wife Adair. We have 4 kids, Noah 17, Donovan 14, Adeline 12, and Michael 10. And we've been going to the Crossing for about 11 years now.
We came to the Crossing after moving here from the Chicago area. We were very involved in our church at our previous home, so we definitely wanted to find a new church home. And the Crossing has been amazing for us because it has definitely stretched us. You know, there was a time that we really struggled with the idea of tithing. And I remember it being very hard, and we were not doing it. We were really excited to make a commitment to Wreck the Roof because we know firsthand what it's like to be at a church, our church home that was started because of other people's generosity.
I think the biggest thing that God has taught us thus far through the Wreck the Roof commitment is to be really good stewards of our time, actually.
All of our children practice instruments so that they can participate in the worship team. The thing about Wreck the Roof is the Crossing has been wrecking our roof since we joined 10 years ago. So this is nothing new to me and to our family. The Crossing has always challenged us to stretch, to serve, to give, and that has changed our life because through one of those moments at the Crossing, we decided to become foster parents. And that's just one of the things that happens when you fall in love with Jesus Christ, and the Crossing helps us do that. Crossings just help us grow closer to Jesus, wanted to follow him to the point where we could serve as a family. And our oldest child has autism. So when we were trying to find a way to serve, we thought we could serve as a family. So we became foster parents, not knowing what God had in plan for that. And then in 2011, we had 2 little kids, as I like to say, 2 little tornadoes came storming through our home. And, you know, we were fortunate enough to be able to adopt them about 18 months later. And, you know, so when Wreck the Roof came by, that was nothing. It was like, sure, you know, whatever God has on tap for us, we will definitely go on with that. We would love to participate in anything that challenges us and grows us, because our family went from 2 to 4 because of how the Crossing likes to encourage us to grow closer to Jesus.
Wreck the Roof has meant to our family as a whole a place where we all can call home. All the kids went to Crossing Camp last year, so that was pretty amazing. They all loved the new camp. They're very involved. So for us, Wreck the Roof is just kind of a continuation of making sure our kids are plugged in.
If people are struggling with keeping the Wreck the Roof commitment, I just, tell them that, first of all, we've been there, we've done that. Nobody's going to be perfect on this journey. Just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again and get back to where you started and start, whatever you originally pledged, whatever you originally felt God moving you to do, just start over. It's a new year. It's a great time to, just start fresh, and don't feel like because you're not being perfect with it that you need to give up or that you should. And we've done that, so. And God will bless it.
Man, I love Brian and Adair's story. And you know what I love even more than that? I've been to 929 when their family is up there and they're leading worship together as a family. It's just incredible. And I've been to camp when they've been working at camp and their kids are involved in camp. And it's just neat to see what God can do in the life of a family that is devoted to Him, just leaning into Him. So I'm excited to hear that story, and I want you to know that that story in different ways, in very unique ways, gets reproduced over and over in so many lives. And those of you that are involved in the Wreck the Roof commitment are doing that. You're actually helping other people to experience that in their individual lives, in their families, in their communities. And I'm just excited that we have the opportunity to partner with them, and to partner with God to be able to accomplish these great things that He does in us and through us and ministers to other people. Well, you are the Delta Force of the crossing, okay? I'm talking to everybody, to all of our locations, especially Pike County. You win the award. There was 16 inches of snow there, and you are ready for services, for both services this weekend. We're thankful for you. Just a mere 12 inches, I think, here in Quincy. I think 13, 14 inches in Macomb, Kirksville, these other communities. But God is going to do incredible things, and I'm thankful for all of you that have shown up and braved the weather to come out here, and especially all the difference makers that are doing volunteer ministry at all of our locations right now. We're so thankful for you. If you're not at one of our locations and you're joining online today, we're really thankful that you're able to join with us, that the snow doesn't stop you from worshiping or learning from the Lord today. I know there's going to be a great big number. And listen, in the chat today, Allison is in the chat. She's right back there. And, you can ask her all kinds of personal questions. It'll be just fine. Just have fun with that. You can talk to her in the chat. Clayton's in the chat, and that one will be especially fun because Clayton just had his wisdom teeth removed a couple of days ago. And so he's on drugs right now, which means, you could get some really funny answers out of him that you could use against him later. So everybody online, I want to encourage you to do that. If you're inside.tv, again, so thankful for you. And we're in a series called It's Just a Phase. So don't miss it. It's just a phase. And what we're doing is trying to just lean into families, lean into parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, good friends of children that can impact those children in mighty, mighty ways. At all of our locations in the children's area, there is something called a resource wall. And that resource wall has great stuff that'll help you, partner with you, come alongside you while you work with your kids and help take captive these phases and make them the Lord's. We also have something called a Parent Q app for your phone, your smart device, that will also give you lots of resources that you need, and they'll be right there in front of you whenever you need them. And they're difference makers, volunteers, and staff members back there at all of our locations to be able to help you with that. Last week we talked about Nehemiah, right? We spent a little time talking about a half-finished wall in Jerusalem that had been broken down, and he had this genius idea that when you put parents in charge, moms and dads, and they're defending the section of the wall that they needed to have completed, there's something formidable about that. We make a difference when we work together. And now we're talking about phases in our children's lives, and I want to define that, okay? If this is your first week, I want to define what a phase is. A phase is a time frame in a kid's life when you can leverage distinctive opportunities to influence a kid's future. Now, a lot of times you've heard it said, it's just a phase, they'll get over it. But we're saying it's just a phase, don't miss it. Capture it, use it, leverage it, make a difference through it. And whether you're a parent or not, this applies to you. Now, we can talk about stories with regards to parents, but I bet you most all of us that are listening to me right now have had an adult in our lives that was not our parent that really spoke profoundly and positively into our lives. I'm so thankful for the other adults that my children were surrounded by when they reach that particular phase where they think their parents become morons. You know that part? And these other people had a cool factor that we didn't have, and they were pouring into my kids and doing a lot of work on my behalf when I felt like I couldn't, like I wasn't reaching as well as I could have reached into their lives. So I'm so thankful for that. Capture what we're talking about, all right? What we're going to do is talk about 6 things today that every child, that every teenager needs. And it kind of boils down into what is on this table in front of me. These are jars full of marbles, okay? There are 936 marbles in this jar. There are 680 in this one, and there are 100 in this one. And what they represent, each one of these marbles represents a week. 1 week in a child's life. So from the time you bring them home from the hospital until they leave your house before they return again and live in your basement, there's about 936 weeks. If you started kindergarten and you miss those other weeks, there's about 680. If you have a junior in high school right now, you have about 100, okay? And I want you to think about this as an illustration, because if you were to have your child and you would calculate how many weeks left they have, and you put that on your kitchen table or on your counter somewhere, and every week you would just remove one of these marbles, just remove one every week, what would it do? This practice of losing these marbles would have a strange effect on us. It would illustrate the collective value of time. It would help us to see what time does and what time does over a period of time, right? It might make us readjust our priorities to capture these moments, to capture these weeks a little better, right? Maybe each week would matter just a little bit more. And it would reinforce this principle. When you see how much time you have left, you tend to get serious about the time you have now. So I want you to think of these like a countdown clock. If you were to have one of these, that's exactly what it would be, right? Something about putting an actual number on the weeks that you have with your child or your teenager really helps you to see and spend time in a smarter way. And it's really not an original idea. Actually, Moses wrote one of the Psalms, or it's recorded, it's his words in Psalm 90, and he said, "Teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." It's an interesting concept. When you number your days or your weeks, it helps you to be more wise on how you use those weeks or spend those weeks. Think about yourself for a moment, right? There's a fun exercise you can do. You can go to this website, numberyourdays.com. You can put your birthday in. I put October 21st, 1959, and it said that I had lived around 21,000 days. I mean, it gives me the actual number of days. I don't remember, it was 20,000, getting close to 21,000. I'm like, wow, 21,000 opportunities, days of opportunities. Some of you probably don't want to do that because you're a little older and it'll be depressing. So maybe not. But for those of you that want to, take advantage of that. It's kind of interesting. So what does that mean? What does it mean to make every day count? To turn am I saying, I want to turn every moment into a teaching opportunity? Am I saying I want you to write a daily journal and keep everything like exact? No, I don't want you to drive yourself crazy, and I don't want you to drive the people around you crazy. Here's a better idea. What if you decide just to take 1 week at a time and capture that week at a time? You know why? Because every week matters. And if every week matters, you don't have to get it all done in a week. That these weeks are chained together. They're strung together like a string of pearls. And you can take advantage over time of those weeks as they compound upon other weeks. There's something about adding them up collectively that make them very powerful. That's why I think losing your marbles can actually keep you from, losing your marbles, right? It's why we say it's not just time that matters. It's this. It's time over time. Time over time. A period of time connected to a number of periods of time. And what happens when you do that? When you spend time over time with your children, with the young people that you have influence in, that you're spending time with. Time over time is what enables you to do this. make history together. And this is the first equation I want us to learn, that time over time equals history. Let's all say that. Time over time equals history. Now, most kids have no idea that when you're doing this, you're actually making history. When you're capturing moments in a week, and then you're connecting them to another week, and then to another week, they don't think in terms of history. They're just kids. They see now, right? And so what do they see? They see, well, we were on vacation and we built a sandcastle. Or it was just another week that my parent took me to swim lessons. Or we played basketball in the driveway today. Or we saw a movie. Or we ate some pizza. Or we prayed at a meal together. Or we went to church together and fought in the car on the way there. But you need to realize that when you're present in your kid's life week after week in a variety of different ways, what you're doing is you're creating their history. You are writing history. Time over time equals history. And as long as we're deciding every day to show up and be present in that, and we do that week after week with a child or a teenager, it's going to have a cumulative effect. And that effect is going to be history. Now, you can't always see the results. Have you ever gone to a family member that you don't see very often? Remember when you were a kid, you'd go to this family member, you're visiting them, and you walk in, and then this like Aunt B or something goes, "Oh, look at you, you're so much bigger than you were before, you're gigantic, and I remember when you were just..." And you're like, "Can I just get back in a car and go home?" But it's actually true. It's actually true. When you don't see someone for a while, then you see them when they're in their formative years, there's like a huge change that takes place, right? And there's a huge change that's taking place in all of our children's lives, but when we're in the moments with them, you don't necessarily see that happening, especially if you're talking about spiritual things. Like spiritual growth is by nature what? It's spiritual. So it's hard to see. It's hard to perceive, but it's happening all the same. Don't ever think that it's not happening. And this happens over time. So think about time for a second. I mean, that's a big thought. That's a pretty heady thought. But why does it exist? It exists for a purpose. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe God created time because He wanted to create a platform for us to communicate things that were way too complex to be able to comprehend in a moment? That it would have to be comprehended over time, strategically over time? I mean, when you go back in the Bible and you read about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, why didn't He just send Jesus right there? Why do you have to go through all this history of thousands of years? You know, oh, you guys messed up, you ate that tree, here's Jesus, okay? No, He doesn't do that. Story after story after story piles up in the Old Testament and then in the New Testament, right? He gave Abraham a son. He made Joseph sit in jail. He raised up Moses to deliver the people. They wandered for 40 years in the wilderness. Have you ever thought about why He did that? What if God was deciding, I want to help you understand something by using time that you could never understand in a moment. Some of the most significant gifts that we can give the next generation is what we give them over time. Not just in a moment. That's why time over time is so important. It's what you do this week, and then you compound that on the next week, and then the next week, and that's what makes it so strategic. See, it's not just 936 marbles. It's your time. So that's the first one that I want you to capture today. That time over time creates history. Let's see that again. Time over time creates history. What's the second equation you need? It's this one. It's love over time. Now, love, come on, that's obvious. We all know that. You're supposed to love, and you're supposed to love your kids, and you're supposed to love them a lot, right? And there's a lot of things that would not make sense in this world if it wasn't for love. Like music, would it make sense if it wasn't for love? What would the blues be without love? It would be the beige. You know, it wouldn't be the blues. It'd be something else, right? What would country music be without love? It would just be beer and trucks. It kind of already is beer and trucks, but, you know, Rock and roll would need a lot more guitar solos if it wasn't for love, right? And rap music, well, that would just stay rap music. Forget that one. Without love, there would be no Whitney, there would be no Aretha, there would be no Dolly or Madonna or Lady Gaga, there'd be no Elton John or Elvis or Eagles or Beatles or Barry White. Barry White. Let's face it, love's just love. Like someone from my generation sang, just a secondhand emotion. Until you put it over time. And when you put love over time, it accomplishes something that you don't want to miss. Something special. We want to think about that. Love over time. You were created for love. You were created to love and be loved. And your children were also created to love and to be loved. And now you are in this unique position to demonstrate this incredible thing of what love over time can do in the life of a child or a teenager. You think by now we'd have this figured out. You think we'd understand this because love is so profound, right? But we miss it. That's why Jesus said this. He said, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your mind and soul and strength. And there is a second part to the great commandment that's just as important as the first part. Love your neighbor as yourself. If I paraphrase that, it would be what? Love matters, right? Loving God matters. Loving yourself matters. Loving people matters. Actually, the great commandment is a whole lot of commandments all mashed up together. Loving God helps you to love yourself. Loving God helps you to love other people. Loving yourself helps you to love God. Loving yourself helps you to love others. Loving others helps you to love God. Loving others helps you to love yourself. And all of those things are simultaneously true. That's why love over time is the best strategy to help your children understand that they matter. When you love children consistently and you keep showing up in their lives week after week and you're demonstrating to them that they're a priority to you, when you love them, in spite of their behavior, in spite of their performance, love over time does something amazing, okay? Love over time is the best way to give a child worth. And that's the second equation. Love over time equals worth. So time over time equals history. Love over time equals worth. Kids today desperately need adults who will love them in a way that will convince them that they're worth something. Right? And when you do that, you have to do that when they're young. Because if they don't get that when they're young, they may never, ever view themselves in a particular healthy way. And if they never learn to love themselves, that can be self-destructive and it can lead to self-destructive behavior. So the way that you love kids while they're kids can dramatically affect their future. That's why we need more adults to step it up. That's why it's time to get serious about loving the kids that are around you, because most research would suggest that the younger the recipient of that love is, the more powerful the impact is. It's like investing in a mutual fund or in a good stock. It gains shares. The sooner you start paying in, the greater the return will be later. The longer you wait, the less you'll earn. Now, we all know that's true. That's common sense. But when you do that in the life of a child, it's going to earn interest. And if you wait till they're adults, you're just going to have slower and lower gains. And one of the best ways to show love over time is to just prove it. Just prove it over and over. How do you prove love? Well, when you read God's word, it's showing you. Because that's what God did. From the very beginning of time to now, what God's been doing is just proving His love. He's been proving it over and over. God's been pursuing a relationship with us. We call it an intimate, personal relationship. He's been doing that from the beginning. And you know what? He does that regardless of our behavior or the mess we make. He still loves us. He just keeps showing up. You don't show up sometimes. You're absent sometimes, but He never fails to show up. And that's why He sent His Son, Jesus. He sent His Son Jesus to walk with us, to be physically present in our lives so we could touch Him, so we could know Him. He wants to prove Himself to us. And He wants us as parents to do that same proving to our children or to the people that we love that are younger than us around us. We just decide to be physically and emotionally consistent, to be present week after week, and taking these moments like this one marble and string them to another one and to another one, and over time over time will equal history. You'll create history, and love over time will create worth. Now, your kids are going to test you, amen? Oh yeah, they're going to test you. They're going to want to see if you really like being around them, even when they're not fun to be around, when they're not lovely, when they're not lovable. I had a friend that had 4 daughters, and they used to get ready to walk out, and he'd say, "Hey, be nice, don't be yourself." And that's true sometimes, right? It's actually true sometimes. And when you tell them you love them, they probably will have times where they don't believe you, that you actually do love them. But you never want to give them an excuse to say, well, you don't love me because you just don't like them enough to hang around with them, right? Love over time creates worth. Here's the third one, and it's words. We've talked about time and love. The third one's words. Words over time. We all have a tendency to underestimate the power of words, don't we? But research has shown that in order to think a thought, you need words. In order to paint a picture, you need words. In order to work a math problem, you need words. Words allow you to think. They help you to see the world and interpret the world that is around you. And it's a big deal to God, the use of words. When you think about it, go back to God's Word. It all started with words, right? You don't have to go very far in the Bible to realize that God was the one who used words first. He uttered the first words. Remember the first 4 words uttered is "let there be light." That's power. There's a lot of power in words, incredible power. There's incredible power in God's words, and there's incredible power in your words. And when I say power, I'm not saying just good power, right? Because words have the power to do as much damage as they have power to do good. Words can be used to love, or words can be used to hate. They can encourage you, or they can tear you down, right? They can expose you to the light, or they can slam a door in your face. They can do a lot of different things. Words have a lot more impact sometimes than we think. That's why there was an early Christian leader named James in the New Testament. And when he was writing the book of James, he talked about the power of words. And when he used words, he said, well, words are like a bit in the mouth of a mighty, muscular horse. That it's a small thing, but it can turn this powerful animal. He said words are like a rudder on a ship. And even though the rudder is actually very small, it has the power to turn that ship and make it submit to your will. They're small things, but they have tremendous influence. Our words. And when you put words over time, something even more significant happens. And it's not just being good at Scrabble or just being the best at tweeting and retweeting. Words over time become a collection of messages that will impact somebody else's direction. All right? So that's our third equation. The third equation is words over time equals direction. Time over time equals history. Love over time equals worth. And words over time equal direction. And we're talking about the direction of your children. It's easy to take words for granted. We use them every day. But words actually affect what we see. They affect how we influence others to see, right? And that's why over time, the words you decided to give your kids and your teenagers are so important. I find it amazing. And, some people will say this dates me. This makes me an older person. But I find it amazing how actually few words are used in the English vocabulary now. and how a curse word is so usable for so many situations. I mean, all you have to do is watch a movie or a TV show, and you'll just see that there's this one-size-fits-all. And what's actually happening here is people are not using their words anymore, right? They're using one word to fit a whole lot of different circumstances and situations, like the Wolf of Wall Street. You know, how many times can you drop an F-bomb in a movie when it just gets stupid, right? When people just kind of lose their ability to communicate. We're not using our words anymore. Maybe it's because we're not teaching words like we should. And you know how the power of words when you inadvertently teach them. Like a preschool kid coming to preschool, and all of a sudden they're using a word, and then the preschool teacher has to go back to mom and say, hey, so-and-so is using this word today, and you're going, oh. Because they actually heard you, or they heard your spouse. When you influence and expand their vocabulary, what you're giving them will shape who they are, how they see the world, how they see themselves, how they view God, how they interpret God, what they're going to imagine. Because words have power. Words over time have power to create direction. When you put words over time, they do something unique. They do 3 other things. Words over time will help a child reason. They help us all reason, right? We need words if we want to reason. One of the greatest indicators of success is the ability to use vocabulary. If you want them to be an innovator or a problem solver or a learner, they need to have their vocabulary. And if they don't expand their vocabulary, they're going to be limited, they're going to get stuck, and they're going to become more dependent, right? So it's important for them to reason. It's also important for this, that words over time help kids win. Now, I've raised 4, and I didn't do it by myself. Allison did it with me, and let me tell you how in our family words work. My wife is known for the quantity of words. Not the quantity of words that she says, but the quantity of words that she is able to receive. You know what I'm talking about? Is that my kids feel very comfortable talking to their mom. And they download into their mom all the time. And what Allison does is she is just a great listener. Me, not so much. I am not a great listener. Here's my problem or my solution. You can call it whatever you want. Maybe your family looks like this too. I'm a problem solver. I'm a fixer. So when one of my kids says, hey, there's this, I'm all in. I tear open my shirt. I got a big S right here, and I'm going to fix it. That's what I do. So needless to say, they don't talk to me if they just want somebody to listen to them. And how often are your kids really not really wanting you to solve anything? They just need an ear. They just want to vent, right? And so the vast volume of that goes to my wife. But every so often, they actually do need a problem solved. And when they do, when they were young, they always went one place. I took them to one place and one place only. Steak and Shake. Steak and Shake. There's no better place in the world to solve a problem. One of my kids get upset. I remember one time, one of them put their hand through the drywall. Bam! They were so upset. I go, get in the car. Oh, man, we're going to Steak and Shake. Yep, going to Steak and Shake. Going to be a teaching moment in Steak and Shake. My preferred food at Steak and Shake is the regular chili, light on the beans. Sometimes they don't do the light on the beans. That can mess up a whole conversation. But what I'm saying is, that's my favorite. I can't tell you what theirs is. But they could all tell you that there's been a lot of problems that have been aired, and then Dad gives the words of wisdom at the Steak and Shake. Now, I may not have the volume, but I've got some quality there. And it's words. Their words and my words. And words over time help kids win. You don't get many of those opportunities, but those stories are critical, right? And you don't know the impact of your words. I have to tell you, I would do those steak and shake moments, and there was never a single time when I had one of my kids go, "Wow, Dad, I never thought about it that way before." Never once. There was never a time when they said, "Okay, your words make me feel so loved." Never once. They never ever once said to me, "You know what? Because you've spoken into my life, you've really changed the way I think about that." Let me tell you what it was usually like. I would be talking and they would go, maybe wipe a little bit. Like, are they even listening? But over time, the words that we use will have an impact, and they communicate value to our kids, the ones in our lives, and they'll help those kids to win. One more thing that words over time can do, and they can help your kids believe. This is really the most critical one of all. I mean, they can all tell you my stories. They've heard my stories. But analogies and adjectives and questions actually shape how your children feel about God. The scripture's true. I have no greater joy than to know that my children walk in the truth. It's absolutely true. Proverbs 22:6. What a truism. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. The things that you have heard or learned from me, these entrust to faithful men, women, who'll be able to lead others also. That's where the payoff happens. When you're giving your kids vocabulary, helping them to believe, you're actually giving them a spiritual vocabulary when you give them words over time. And none of that's going to matter to them unless they are sure that they matter to you. And that's why words over time have a much greater impact. When you're present in their life and you do that consistently, when you actually like hanging around them, it's going to affect how they hear what you say. It's really interesting. A kid will change how you say what you say, but you'll hear your own words sometimes repeated back to you. It'd be interesting, right, to hear that. And loving a kid will change how they hear that, how they hear what you say. So, back to the table. 936 marbles, or 680, or 100. But every one of them a precious opportunity to show up. Every one of them an opportunity to exert personal influence. And over a period of time to create something absolutely priceless. Why? Because time over time equals history. And love over time equals worth. And words over time equal direction. You know, right now you're spending time. At all of our locations right now you're spending time. And you actually took the time to do the work to come and be in a location. Those of you that are watching online, you're taking time today. You have no idea what God will do with that. You have no idea what God knows that we don't know at this particular moment. It reminds me of an old story back in Britain. And it was a snowstorm, not unlike the one that we've just experienced across all of our locations. And there was a preacher that would go to these different locations in small towns, a circuit riding preachers, before cars, so he had to ride by horseback. And there was no way. They were snowed in, and there was no way that the preacher could make it. And the people in this little village that had this church knew that he wasn't going to be able to make it. And so one Sunday school teacher decided to open the doors of a church anyway. Would have been easy today, wouldn't it? Would have been easy today to say, you know what? Like a lot of other churches, we're just not going to have church today. But do you ever think about that one opportunity? That one voice? That one life? In Britain that time, a Sunday school teacher decided he would step up and preach a sermon. Now, he didn't have anything prepared, and I'm sure whatever he said was not that well put together. But for some reason that day, there was a young man, and there were only 6 people that attended church that day. And one of them was this young man. And he heard a sermon from a Sunday school teacher that was not cleverly constructed, but responded to it. And he wanted to make Jesus Christ his own. His name was Charles Haddon Spurgeon, who was later known as the Prince of Preachers, one of the greatest expositors of the Bible that ever lived, on a snowy day with 6 people and a Sunday school teacher speaking. You don't have any idea what God can do with your time. The time that you invested today, and how you invest that time in your children, not just for today, but for all their days. We're moving to a time of decision.